The Miami Dolphins finished the 2023 season with an 11-6 record and made the playoffs for the second straight year. And despite an 11-6 record sounding good, and it is a good record, don't get me wrong, it was a very up and down year for this team for several reasons. They started out with a 3-0 record as they beat the Chargers, Patriots, and Broncos in consecutive weeks, and that's great. You have to beat the teams in front of you, but they lost to the Bills in Week 4 with a score of 48-20, and this would be the sign of how the rest of the Dolphins season would go. In Weeks 5 and 6, they beat the Giants and Panthers, each by double digits, to improve to 5-1, and the connection between the Giants and Panthers is each of those teams finished with bottom 6 records in the entire league. They would then lose 2 out of their next 3 to the Eagles and Chiefs, both of whom made the playoffs, and you get the point. The lone team Miami beat with a winning record in 2023 was the Dallas Cowboys, who they beat in Week 16 with a score of 22-20. They would go on to lose the final 2 regular season games to the Ravens and Bills, and then the Chiefs in the wildcard round of the playoffs to close out their 2023 season, all of which were playoff teams. And in the offseason, the Dolphins gave quarterback Tua Tagovailoa a 4-year, $212 million contract, and with a lot of other moves this team made this offseason, they have cornered themselves. The Dolphins aren't going for a wildcard exit, no. They're going for a Super Bowl, and the big question for them entering the 2024 season is, will they get there? Well, we're going to break everything down in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by breaking down who the Dolphins signed in free agency and who they lost in free agency. The Dolphins lost a few big players from last year to this year, and the first, of course, is defensive tackle Christian Wilkins. Christian is a very good player, and while he may not be a top 2 or 3 defensive tackle, mainly because of how loaded the position is with guys like Chris Jones, Dexter Lawrence, and Quinnen Williams, I do think Christian is in the next tier, and he is going to be a player the Dolphins are going to miss, and in a big way. He is coming off a year in which he had a career high in quarterback hits and sacks, and not only that, but he has been an incredibly durable player since being drafted back in 2019, as he has missed a grand total of 2 career games, which was back in 2020, and it was because Wilkins missed a few games due to COVID, so he's never missed a game due to a real on-the-field injury. And as we know, the best ability is availability. And it also helps when you are a really great player, which Christian of course is, and replacing him is not going to be easy. They also lost guard Robert Hunt, and while Robert was a good player for this team over the last few years, I don't think he was worth the $100 million contract Carolina gave him. And inevitably, if you have $100 million staring you in the face, are you really going to decline the opportunity? No, and Miami was never going to be able to compete with that type of offer, especially given the situation Carolina was in. I don't think Robert was egregiously overpaid to the point where he should have been offered a $60 million contract over 5 years or anything crazy like that, just slightly overpaid. But the point is, losing 2 players in free agency to $100 million plus contracts in one offseason is huge. But these weren't the only 2 players they lost. They also lost linebacker Andrew Van Ginkel to the Vikings, defensive tackle Raekwon Davis to the Colts, and linebacker Jerome Baker to the Seahawks. While Andrew Van Ginkel is not a household name, I think it is worth noting that Christian Wilkins called him the smartest player he's ever played with. And when you have to replace countless starters from one year to the next, with limited resources, it's going to be difficult. And the one loss that I don't think will be noticed until a few games are played is offensive lineman Connor Williams going to the Seahawks. Now, what needs to be contextualized with the Connor Williams loss in free agency was he tore his ACL in a December game against the Titans, and there was concern he wouldn't be ready when the season started, but like we've mentioned before, center is one of the most important positions on the field, and Connor is a tremendous run blocker that undoubtedly played a big part in the Dolphins' success last season. And when you have to replace as many guys as the Dolphins have from one season to the next, while internally thinking they are in a Super Bowl window, well, this all scares me heading into the 2024 season. And I know it's easy to sit back from afar and say, well, with the limitations this roster has, and with the turnover this roster had from 2023 to 2024, they're probably going to be anywhere from a 9 to 11 win team, and it would be nice for this team's future if they won a playoff game. But let's call it what it is. The Dolphins, despite not winning a playoff game since the year 2000, in what was a wild card round victory over a then 24-year-old Peyton Manning, well, the Dolphins internally think this is their year, and you can tell by who they signed and who they prioritized this offseason. They didn't bring in guys like Odell, Jordan Poyer, and Calais Campbell to sit back and say, hey guys, come play in South Florida and enjoy partial retirement in the city of Miami while getting paid a hefty chunk of change. No. They brought these guys in to be short-term players and guys who they think are upgrades from where the roster previously was, with one goal in mind. And that, of course, is to win a Super Bowl. That also applies to free agent signings like Kendall Fuller and Jonnu Smith, and it did apply to Shaq Barrett, but he retired before the season began, so I'm going to exclude him from this, but the concept applied. Now, why I worry about the 2024 Dolphins defense is they are already at a disadvantage heading into the year because of injuries that happened late in the 2023 season. Jalen Phillips tore his Achilles on Black Friday, and Bradley Chubb tore his ACL on New Year's Eve in Baltimore. And why this could hurt the 2024 Dolphins is simple. We already know Bradley Chubb is going to miss the first 4 games of the year as he is going to start on the PUP list. Now, Jalen Phillips is coming off of a major injury, and I, nor anyone, knows how he is going to play in the first few games of the year coming off of the torn Achilles. What I will say is he will not miss any games to start the year, and all you can do is hope he is the player he was pre-injury. And I did not mention this at any point in the video prior to this, so I do want to go ahead and acknowledge this because I know Dolphins fans are certainly thinking it, especially when they were outscored 103-40 in the final 3 games of their 2023 season, meaning the final 2 regular season games and the playoff game against Kansas City. But it is absolutely worth mentioning they were down several starters in this game, including their top 2 edge rushers and their starting center. Now, I don't think Miami wins this game regardless, but I know they were down several starters during the final few games of the year, and some Dolphins fans legitimately think they could have won had they been healthy. The reason we bring this up is because health for the Dolphins, and technically every other NFL team, is going to be critical this year. And I realize that's an incredibly obvious statement, but I think it applies more to Miami than other teams because of the depth they have in their secondary minus the edge rushing group. I actually really like Miami's edge rushing group, and they also drafted Chop Robinson in the first round of the draft. And I know they have some great players on this defense, like Javon Holland, like Jalen Phillips, and like Jalen Ramsey, but aside from Holland and Phillips, a lot of these guys are older, and I do worry about the miles they have in their bodies from years and years of playing in the NFL, and also aside from Kader Kohou. One other thing I worry about with the Dolphins that does not apply to every team, but I worry about how this team will play when they're playing against other great NFL teams. I know the obvious thing to do is dismiss the final games against the Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs, like we just mentioned because of injuries, but those are the teams you're going to play when it matters. Just being honest, I don't care if the Dolphins beat the Broncos 70-20 or if they beat them 13-10 because I expect Miami to win 90% of their games against non-playoff teams. And out of their 6 losses last year, only 1 was against a non-playoff team, which was against the Titans in Week 14 when Miami blew a double-digit lead with less than 3 minutes to play. What I worry about with the Dolphins is how they're going to play against the elite teams of the conference, and from a strategic and competitive standpoint, Aaron Rodgers going down last year undoubtedly helped Miami. I would be shocked if they sweep the Jets this year, and there's no chance they beat them 30-0 like they did in one of their games last year, or hold them to just 263 total yards in the 2 games they play them, and yes, that's total, not 263 yards the Jets had in each game either. And I think a lot of things that went Miami's way last year, like the Bills stumbling at times as they lost to teams like the Patriots and Broncos, and even fell to 6-6 at a point, and again, from a competitive standpoint, having a 4-time league MVP go down in Week 1, and effectively ending a division rival season then and there. And just being honest, you cannot rely on that happening again. That can't be your game plan heading into a season. And when you sign all of the veteran free agents Miami did this offseason, they have cornered themselves into a Super Bowl or bust mentality. Odell doesn't care if they lose in the wild card round or the AFC Championship game, and the same applies to Calais Campbell for that matter too. And when you corner yourself like this, it's a now or never situation. And even for as good as I think this team will play at times, I don't think it's going to be enough. Now, with the 2024 Dolphins offense, we can go ahead and call it what it is. When healthy, this is, without a doubt, going to be one of the most must-see offenses in the entire NFL. Maybe even the most must-see offense in the entire NFL. And I will be especially looking forward to seeing what wrinkle Mike McDaniel, who by the way was recently extended, what wrinkle he has up his sleeve in the first couple of weeks of the year. Last year it was the cheat motion, and it was the fact of where we could start Tyreek horizontal and then just have him, be 16, 17 miles an hour as he crosses the line of scrimmage, which, as you can imagine, puts the defense at an extreme disadvantage. The 2023 Dolphins would go on to finish second in points per game and first in total yards offensively, and it was, for the most part, a great year. Now, there are a couple of concerns that I'm going to have for the Dolphins this year, and we'll get to the one you're probably thinking of, Dolphins fans, but one of the concerns I am going to have is losing Connor Williams, who, like we've said, signed with the Seahawks, and then, of course, Robert Hunt, who signed with the Panthers. Replacing two interior offensive linemen is not going to be easy. It's not easy in the NFL. This isn't Alabama where you have, oh, okay, let's just have J.C. Latham get drafted number 7 overall and then replace him with another 4-star offensive lineman that we recruited 2 or 3 years ago that is ready to step up and play a good year and a half and then go get drafted in the first round. It doesn't work like that in the NFL. So how Mike McDaniel and how the Dolphins go about that, and of course protecting Tua Tagovailoa, who, as we know, is not mobile. How they go about that is going to be one thing I am going to be paying attention to. The reality is Tyreek Hill is going to be a phenomenal receiver this year if he stays healthy. I wouldn't doubt at all that he becomes the first player in NFL history to have 3 straight 1,700-yard receiving seasons, and there's not a lot to say. This offense is loaded. Now, the other concern that I do have is, how is this offense going to play in December? How are they going to play when they have cold games? How are they going to play when they're playing the premier teams? Because again, and this is what I will go back to with the Dolphins offense, because for me, it's very much I'm not going to fully buy into what they're doing until we see it against teams that, that matter, and teams that are games that matter in week 15, 16, 17, and 18, when playoff seedings are on the line. Because it's, for me this year, for the Dolphins, it's always going to be kind of a foot half out the door, because I really want to see them do it against the premier teams. And the one thing that I'm going to point back to, even if they beat Buffalo in week 2, which is going to be a big game, September, I fully expect the Dolphins to, I wouldn't doubt that they have 120 plus points in the month of September alone. They're going to be a great team, and everybody knows that. But what really sticks with me with the Dolphins entering this season, again, keep in mind that they lost 2 starters along the offensive line, is the fact that they only put up 40 total points in the final 3 games of their season. The final 2 regular season games, and then, of course, the playoff game against the Chiefs. Now, again, I know they had several starters out, but that's what I'm going to go back to, is how are the Dolphins going to be able to play when it comes hell or high water? And everybody is affected by injuries. We can also, let's just call that what it is. Everybody is affected by injuries. Maybe not to the extent of, both pass rushers being done for the year and every other injury that the Dolphins had, but that's where I'm going to be with this team. Now, I will be honest, one player that I do expect to go back up to the player that I think he is at the NFL level, I thought Jalen Waddle had a bit of a disappointing 2023 season for him. Not in general, but I think Jalen is a better player than what he showed throughout 2023, and I think he will be more of the 2022 version of himself. So, again, please take that positively, but I think he's a much better player than we saw last year, and I would be kind of surprised if Tyreek and Jalen don't combine for at least 2,800 or 2,900 receiving yards, maybe even 3,000, which is what they did back in 2022. I am very eager to see how that plays out. Now, my breakout player for the 2024 Dolphins is running back Devon Achane. Achane is he's not just a 40 time, he's not just a very fast back. I mean, he's one heck of a player, and when you have the trio that this offense does with Achane, Raheem Mostert, and Jalen Wright, I think this is the year where we're going to see Raheem Mostert kind of, step back a little and let Achane really blossom and really grow into that role. Raheem has been in the league for a very long time, and I think Achane is going to... I think he's not only going to rush for 1,000 yards, but I think he's going to be around 1,300 or 1,400 total yards, possibly even double-digit touchdowns, and I am really, really looking forward to seeing how Mike McDaniel uses him, not just in the run game this year, but Achane is going to be quite the weapon to use in the pass game too. Now, I will address this because he's a big name. I'm sure it will be brought up. I don't expect Odell Beckham to be a big player. Odell is simply nowhere close to the player he was 7-8 years ago, and in theory, he's going to have favorable situations, but I don't think Odell is going to, turn the clock back and be a 1,000-yard player, and that there's a possibility the Dolphins have 3 1,000-yard players in this offense. I would be absolutely shocked if that happened, but I think it'll be somewhere maybe around 30 to 40 catches. Maybe even that's a little high. We'll see. I just don't expect that much from Odell at this point in his career. Overall, this is going to be one of the best units in the league, again, barring health, and I'm very, very excited to see how this team does, but the one thing, whenever we do weekly recaps early on, weeks 1 through 4, I'm not going to overreact, even if they put up 70 against somebody like they did last year. I'm not going to overreact and say, this team is going to the Super Bowl already because of this, and the 2024 Dolphins, for me, personally, is going to rely and depend on how they perform down the stretch of the year and when the weather gets cold. The Dolphins 2024 draft class was one I liked overall, but I wouldn't necessarily think that they're going to be top of the lines in terms of rookie impact, at least this year. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, when you select Chop Robinson in the first round, when you have Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips above him on the depth chart, he's not going to play all that much. Although Bradley Chubb being out the first couple games of the year will thrust Chop more into a starting role or a more imminent role immediately. So I think Chop will be more of a rotational player once Bradley gets back, and I think that's going to be the best case for Chop long term. Now, I was a little worried when this selection was made because at the time, back in April, we didn't know how Jalen Phillips was recovering. Ultimately, Jalen Phillips is, good now and he's going to play week 1, but I thought there was going to be a point where Chop may have been thrust into a starting role and be the edge one by himself as a rookie, and if he would have had to have been in that role, and if Jalen and Bradley missed the first 4 games together instead of just Bradley, I thought that would have been setting Chop up for failure. So, in terms of rookie impact, especially from their first round pick, I wouldn't expect all that much. I think Chop will have a couple of really, really big splash plays, and I think the opinions on him will vary significantly, because I think there's going to be people that legitimately buy into Chop, think he's going to be this type of player on every down, and the highlight reel plays are going to be fun, but again, he's going to be a rookie edge rusher, so I wouldn't expect all that much, and even when Bradley comes back, that's obviously going to limit what Chop will be able to do. So if I had to put a numerical projection for Chop in 2024, I think a successful season for him would be anywhere from 35 to 40 pressures, and in fact, I think that would be really good, and right around 5 to 7 sacks. And for a rookie that will eventually be the 3rd rusher on this team, that would be pretty good. Now, their 2nd round pick, Patrick Paul, may end up starting more games than their 1st round pick, Chop Robinson, and here's why. Teron Armstead has been in the NFL for over a decade, and he has never played 16 games in a season. Now, granted, Teron he's not playing like 4 games, 6 games, and 4 games here. It's more of like a 10-game, a 13-game season, an 8-game season, a 14-game season. But the point is Teron is not a guy who he doesn't have perfect attendance. He never has. So I would be pretty surprised if we're entering year 11 or year 12 of Teron's career and all of a sudden he has perfect attendance. So I would expect 2nd round pick Patrick Paul to have significant playing time at some point, whether it's a spot start for 1 game or whether it's a 4 or 5 game span in a row. And that kind of also plays into my concerns with the 2024 Dolphins offense, is the Offensive line, switching out, and then of course Teron Armstead being replaced by a rookie left tackle. We'll see how that pans out in the long run. Although I do like Patrick, I liked him as a prospect, and I think he'll be fine. It's just I always worry about the transition period from college to the NFL in the trenches. Unless you are that rare player, kind of like a Joe Alt for reference or Penei Sewell, I generally worry about offensive linemen. Now, Jalen Wright could be the most fun projection. Obviously, everyone knows Jalen, and if you know Jalen's game, you know there's a lot of speed involved in his game, but how much is he really going to play behind both Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane? I mean, Jalen's going to get his touches. He's going to have a couple of splash plays for sure, but how much, down-to-down impact is he going to have? That's one that concern is a strong word because it's always good to have depth, but I wouldn't expect Jalen Wright to have 900 or 1,000 total yards as a rookie, and if he does, there would be a cost to that, and it would be if Achane and Raheem Mostert both go down. So I would argue for the 2024 Dolphins, the less rookie impact, the better, unless Chop Robinson explodes and wins Defensive Rookie of the Year, but mainly for the guys after Chop, they were selected as backup/development pieces, so in some ways I hope for the sake of the 2024 Dolphins, because internally they think they are Super Bowl contenders. I would hope for the sake of the 2024 Dolphins that outside of Chop they have minimal rookie impact, because again that would constitute either multiple injuries or multiple guys underperforming. So outside of Chop, wouldn't expect too much. I like Malik Washington. I thought he was a really good player coming out of Virginia, but how much is he really going to be able to eat in this offense? And I think the answer is not a lot. So outside of Chop, I wouldn't expect that much from the 2024 Dolphins draft class, but I do want this to be clear. Love the projection, love the future for this class, and I think they'll be very impactful in 2025 and beyond. The Miami Dolphins' schedule, for being a team in the AFC that made the playoffs last year, could be a lot more difficult than what it is. And to be completely honest, I wouldn't be surprised if this team starts out 5-0. Now, I think there are a couple of things if this team starts out 5-0. If you are to start out with that impressive of a record and that loud of a record, there's going to be one hell of a target on your back. And the thing with the Dolphins that obviously they can't control, nobody can control who you play. But their schedule isn't all that bad. And I think this team is going to make the playoffs this year. When you look at the 2024 Dolphins schedule, I struggle to find 7 wins. And sure, they're going to lose a couple of games here and a couple of games there. But in the grand scheme of things, I wouldn't be surprised they start out 9-2, 10-2, 9-3. I mean, they're going to be a very difficult team to beat. And the thing that will kind of hurt them in the long run, and we've said this with several other teams, Detroit is another team that has an early bye for reference, but the week 6 bye, I don't think that's anything but disadvantageous for a team that wants to make a deep postseason run the way the Dolphins think they're going to. And like we said, during the early parts of the video, this team internally thinks they are going to the Super Bowl. I mean, they didn't sign all these veterans to wash away at South Beach and say, all right, guys, we'll pay a couple $1 million, have fun in early retirement. No, they legitimately think they're going to the Super Bowl. Now, if they can get through that first 5-game stretch of versus Jacksonville, versus Buffalo, at Seattle, versus the Titans on Monday night, and then at the Patriots in week 5, I don't think sure, Jacksonville, Buffalo is going to be difficult. Going all the way from Miami all the way to Seattle is going to be tough. But do you think that they're automatically going to lose that game before they even play? I don't. And the one stretch for the Dolphins that I'm really, really going to be paying attention to starts in week 13 through the end of the season. They play at Green Bay on Thanksgiving night, then come home to play the Jets, then go to Houston, then play San Francisco, then go to Cleveland, and then go to the Jets to finish the 2024 season. If somehow, some way, they can go 3-3, 4-2 is going to be tough, admittedly, in that stretch, but if somehow they can go 3-3 during that stretch, then again, this team can win 10 or 11 games. It's going to be difficult playing the Jets and Bills 4 times a season, and then that 6-game stretch to end the season. But what I would say off of that 6-game stretch to end the season, unless this team is the number 1 seed, which, to be clear, I don't think they're going to be, I think this team is going to inevitably be a divisional round exit, because the Dolphins, let's just call it what it is, guys. Those 6 games before the playoffs start is a playoff stretch and a half before the playoffs even start. And like we said, whenever you have that early bye, I think that's going to be incredibly disadvantageous for them. And then to have a playoff span before the playoffs start, guys, I think they're going to be a maximum divisional round exit, and I think that might even be a little rich. I think the Dolphins can absolutely start out 6-0, 6-1, 7-1, be great through the first 7 or 8 games, but the brutal end of the season is eventually going to take a toll. And I don't trust this team to win 3 straight road games to get to the Super Bowl. I just don't. I don't know where you guys stand on that. Please let me know what you think below. Please comment how far you think the Dolphins are going to go this year, as that's going to wrap up the 2024 Dolphins team preview. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as it helps the channel tremendously, and I will see you next time. Love you guys.